Hello, welcome to Glasgow Rangers Nation with me, your host, Owen James, the channel that brings you all your latest Rangers news, guys. We're going to talk Russell Martin today. We're going to talk, obviously, what Russell Martin had to say in the interview that he gave to Rangers TV ahead of the Club Brugge game on Sunday. He spoke to Rangers TV. Some interesting quotes and some interesting comments to come out of that interview, ahead of the game. Really fascinating stuff. We're going to talk a little bit of that, about that. I'm also going to, we're going to sort of lance the boil. We're going to make the discussion. Look, I'm not saying for a minute that this guy is coming to the club. I'm not saying that this is a realistic target. But we're going to talk a little bit of Jamie Vardy, 38 years old, looking for a new club after leaving Leicester City. Could he do a job? Could he be a player short term? Looking at the striking situation as it is at this moment in time, could Jamie Vardy come in and make an impact for Glasgow Rangers? We'll talk a little bit about that shortly. Right, look. Let's start off with the Russell Martin interview that was given to Rangers TV today. Some very interesting bits and pieces that came out of that. I think he kind of went and directly addressed the whole signing more experienced players argument. There's been, I think, a little bit of a negative undertow to the arguments of a number of our fans, particularly on social media. And I get social media is a poisonous place, guys. I've had some pretty hideous stuff leveled at me over the last few years, months, weeks, whatever you want to term it as. I've even had people having a go and abusing my mum and cancer and things like that. That's how low some people will sink on that social media platform. But look, he said that basically that, the bringing of Joe, you was talking about Joe Rothwell in particular, obviously, and he said that, Joe's a great player. He's a top bloke. He's a top player. He's a winner, and he is someone who's won back-to-back promotions. Basically, he said, he has a winning mentality. He knows how to win. And he talked about the fact that, at the club at this moment in time, we have a lot of very young, inexperienced players. And he's right, Kiefte, Hamza's still here for now. Connor Barron, Raskan, he's still very young. We've got Nsiala, you've got Sterling, still can be considered a young player. There's a lot of younger players at the club, Finley Curtis, Bailey Rice. And he talked about how these older players and this experience was needed to come in and kind of put their arm around, lead these guys, give these guys a bit of a bit more experience, give these guys a bit of a, helping hand along the way. And I think, that was very clear then in him answering directly those people that have talked about, well, why are we signing these older players? Why are we going for these old guys? Well, it's because, Martin knows that, yes, of course, the trading model is important. You look at Celtic and you look at how they operate it. It is very important. You look at Brentford and Brighton as well. But he also recognises that if we are going to win, if we are going to be a team with a winning mentality, with a successful mentality, with a leadership group within the squad, then the likes, obviously, of Joe Rothwell, who has joined, Connor Cody, who looks like he might join, are experienced players. They are older players. They are players who can come in, put their arm around the younger players, help them, guide them along, bring them on and develop them. And, you can't win anything with kids. It was a famous saying that was often thrown back in Alan Hansen's face post that 1999 Manchester United team. But, even that team had a core of experience, the Peter Schmeichels of this world, the Steve Bruces, etc., so the Roy Keanes. So, there was a core of experience. And I think, look, not for a minute am I saying that we have players of the same level of ability as Peter Schmeichel and Roy Keane. I'm not, likening Jack Butland to Peter Schmeichel or Joe Rothwell to Roy Keane or Steve Bruce to Connor Cody in any way, shape or form. But what I am saying is that we do need that experienced group, and Russell Martin is quite correct in his assertion when he says that. He also spoke, we've got some fascinating stuff we heard about the signings as well, coming up, so hang on for that. He also spoke about the fitness side of things, and he said, how they'd played TNS, they'd won the second game 3-0, but he'd worked them exceptionally hard before that game because he wanted to see how they played whilst under fatigue, and he said that they would be playing under fatigue this weekend as well, and he wanted to see how they'd react. He said that they'd run hard, they'd worked hard over the last sort of couple of weeks, and he said, this was a big thing for them. He says, because a lot of what we're doing and a lot of how we want to be will be about how hard we run, how hard we work, and how brave we are. And I think, look, that is a big part of what every fan wants. They want the players on that field who are playing for their team to run through brick walls, to go that extra mile, that even when they're tired, to just keep on going and keep on going and keep on running and keep on trying and being brave and taking those decisions. And I think that is very much what Martin is trying to do in the way that he is coaching the team, and also the way that he is training and going through the fitness regime with the players. And look, hopefully the fitter those players are, the more resolute they are, the more stronger they are, the less injuries hopefully will occur. And we all know that injuries have been a major issue for Rangers over the last couple of seasons. So, that's a big thing as well that he mentioned. Now, he did talk about signings, and he talked about, how it was exciting to get the signings in, like Max Aarons, Joe Rothwell, Lyle Cameron, and Manny Fernandez. He said, he'd almost forgotten that Max Aarons was a new signing because he'd been there so long. He said, the guys had come in, they'd settled in well, they were working hard, they were bonding well with their teammates and doing very well. And he talked about, the ones that will come in. He very much referenced the fact that there will be further signings in what he said. So it was quite clear to me from listening to Russell Martin today that there will be more signings on the way, or there is more signings on the way. He also said that we will still need more help further down the line after Panathinaikos. So it's clear that whatever signings we are making now, whatever additions to those signings we make before Panathinaikos, we will continue to look and make those signings. But he spoke very clearly and addressed again, I think, what a lot of people had said about, the fact that signings had seemed slow initially. He addressed that. He said that, that Dan Purdy and Kevin Thelwell were working very hard, but the issue that Rangers had was that a lot of the players that they were getting in contact with were still on the beach, were still on holiday, were still away with their families, and getting them to talk and to discuss their futures was a very difficult thing to do. So, look, that's kind of addressing that kind of concern that I think a lot of fans had. Now, another fascinating comment that Russell Martin made was, he said that when we've spoken to people and they say, well, I need to hear my options, we're on to the next one. So basically, it's saying that if these players are not desperate to be at Rangers, if they are not basically coming and saying, yes, I want to be here, yes, this is the club for me, then we don't want them. That's the attitude they're taking. If they're seeing Rangers as just an option and not the club they want, then they don't want them. Now, look, there's two ways to look at this. And I know some fans will say, well, that's a stupid attitude because we'll miss out on players, because players will go away and look at options, then we'll come back and decide that Rangers was the best option for them. I get that. But guys, come on. What is the one thing that we've all said about a lot of these players that have let us down, that have failed, that have not given everything for the club over the last 12 months, 2 years? What is it that we've all said? That they don't want to be here, they only want to be here for the wages, that this is not their first option, that they genuinely don't care, that they genuinely couldn't give a shit about the club. It's just a payday to them. So this is showing that we only now want players who want to be at this football club, that are desperate to be at this football club, that want to give their all for this football club. And he said about Joe Rothwell that, the moment that he sat down with Joe, he said that Joe was desperate to be here, absolutely desperate to be here. And we saw a little bit, didn't we, of what Jermaine Defoe said the other day, that Connor Cody's kind of got that same desperation to be here as well. And at the end of the day, that's the type of player you want in your team, is a player that wants to be at the football club, a player that wants to die for the shirt, the player that wants to run through brick walls. And it's nice to hear that Russell Martin, that Kevin Thelwell, that Dan Purdy are working on the example of, you know what, if you don't want to be here, if you don't see this as your best option, your first option, we don't want you. We're no one's second choice. We're no one's second best. We're no one's backup option. You don't want to be here. There's the door. Fuck right off. At the end of the day. And it's lovely to hear that. And it shows, in a way, the commitment that he's also got as well to the club. And I really like that quote. And as you know, I wasn't a massive fan of the appointment. I wasn't a huge fan. I was very down about the appointment. But look, the more I hear him, the more impressed I am at what he's got to say and how he speaks about the club and how he speaks about the signings and the way of playing and the way that he wants, what he wants from the players. And this is another quote for me that just says that this is about getting together a bunch of players who want to be at this club, that want to die for this club, that want to fight for this club, that actually want to play for Rangers, and that actually want to be here. And that's a massive thing for me. a huge thing for me. Well, that's pretty much what Russell Martin said. And he said also as well, of course, there would be a number of changes and a lot of changes of personnel on Sunday as well. So I think, whatever the starting 11 is, that's not indicating that that's the starting 11 for Panathinaikos. There will be a lot of changes made during the game, especially given the fatigue levels of the players. Right, let's talk Jamie Vardy. Right, look, this is something that is continually being mentioned. This whole situation around Jamie Vardy, isn't it? This situation where people are talking about, saying that basically we want. Jamie Vardy wants to be at a club where he is a regular starter. Jamie Vardy is 38 years old. So that's the major downside, with Jamie Vardy, that he's 38. That if you sign Jamie Vardy, that he is a player who will be here for a year, maybe two, maximum. He's a short-term option. He's a short-term fill-in. Now, given the fact that we could lose Dessers and Hamza and only have Danilo as our own striker, and that we could only get, say, Dor Turgeman in, given the fact that Freegan has now joined Hull, is it worth perhaps taking a punt on Vardy, for 12 months, 18 months, going out there? Jamie Vardy has done it at the highest level, and I think it's worth mentioning that this guy scored 10 goals in the Premier League last season in an absolutely god-awful Leicester team, in a Leicester team that was absolutely genuinely one of the worst football teams to play in the Premier League. I've got a good mate who's a Leicester fan, and he talks about how Vardy was the only one that seemed to give a bollocks and seemed to try last year, and took the chances that were created for him, and there were few and far between. Vardy is someone who's played at the highest level. He scored goals at the highest level. Like I said, he still scored 10 goals last season in the Premier League in a shit team. That's a pretty decent achievement. He's full of character. He's a real, bloke's bloke. He's a real player's player. He's still got a bit of pace about him. He's still got a lot of physicality about him. He knows where the goal is. I think his shot conversion rate is around about 55%. He converts more than 1 in 2 of the chances he gets. So, obviously, probably a lot better than Cyril Dessers, for example. Gone. Wherever he's gone, he's scored goals. This is his career in the different competitions. I thought I'd break it down by competition rather than by club. So you can see kind of how he is. In the Premier League, he played 342 games, scored 145 goals with 50 assists, averaged a goal every 183 minutes, which in the Premier League is pretty decent. Played 98 championship games, scored 38 goals, 16 assists, averaged a goal every 162 minutes in the championship, so better off in that weaker league. National League, 31 and 36, a goal every 97 minutes. Pretty good. 27 goals in 24 in the FA Cup. But overall, in his career, he played 544 games so far. He scored 237 goals, 88 assists. He averages a goal every 171 minutes, which is pretty decent. Especially, obviously, as you get older, you get less chances, you get less opportunities to score those goals. He clearly is still got a little bit of something about him. Now, look, my first option is to get Dor Turgeman. That has to be the first option. If one of Dessers or Hamza leaves within the next week, then for me, it's go get Turgeman, get him signed up, get him into the club, and get him ready to play, because I think he's a top player. I think he really is. He's young, he's direct, he's quick, he can use both feet, he's good in the air. He looks a really good footballer. He really does. So, but for Jamie Vardy, this is a guy who Ruud van Nistelrooy, goal scorer extraordinaire, Ruud van Nistelrooy, labelled a living legend when he was Leicester manager. Rob Tanner of The Athletic has labelled him the greatest Leicester player. Now, they had Gary Lineker, for example, at Leicester, who was captain of England and was England's record goal scorer for a long time, yet Jamie Vardy is held in higher esteem, won a Premier League title with Leicester, which, is almost the equivalent of, say, Hearts or Hibs winning a Scottish Premiership now. In terms of last season, Vardy played 2,899 minutes. He scored 10 goals, 4 assists, 14 goal contributions in 36 games. Averaged 1.5 shots per 90. Now, let's bear in mind, of course, he was playing in a very bad team. Averaged 0.9 shots per 90 minutes. Had a 55.3% shot on target rate. And had 20.1 touches per 90 minutes in a very poor Leicester side. Now, I've got to say I'm a bit kind of split on this one. You know, part of me says, well, look, we should be looking more long term. We should be going out and signing strikers who are going to be here long term. And I think had we still had Freegan and Turgeman as options, I would have been fully no to Vardy, absolutely no to Vardy. But you know, given the fact that we are fast approaching this Panathinaikos game, given the fact that we need to get in the Champions League, given the fact that Jamie Vardy could pretty much hit the ground running from day one. You know, yes, he hasn't played in Scottish football, but he's played in British football. He's played non-league football. He's played at all different levels of the football pyramid in England. He's used to the physicality. He's used to the speed. He's used to the aggression. And let's face it, playing non-league football and probably being the best player on that pitch by an absolute country mile, he's probably used to getting the shit kicked out of him as well, which he would definitely do in Scotland. Now, yes, there is that kind of prerequisite he's put on any deal that he wants to be a guaranteed starter, you know, which I'm a little bit not great about, because let's face it, how can anyone kind of say that they should be a starter? You know, because at the end of the day, you know, if you're poor, playing badly, you know, you're out of form or you're just not looking good, then you shouldn't be starting. Of course you shouldn't. You should be starting your strongest 11s. But, you know, short term, you know, for one season, you know, to give us time to perhaps go and find another striker to come in next summer to supplement Turgeman and Danilo, could Jamie Vardy be that man? You know, and the fact that he's only going to cost wages, he's only going to cost a signing on fee, not a transfer fee, you know, I think is a big attraction. And, you know, he's spoken about Rangers. He's spoken in good terms about Rangers. And Tony Pulis, the former Stoke City manager, he spoke about him on the Midlands TV station. And he said that basically that Vardy would have a massive impact in Scotland. And he thought that Vardy could still do it in Scotland and score an awful lot of goals. You know, look, I'm kind of, like I said, split. But part of me is now thinking that, you look, short term, 12 months, give him a 12-month contract. Let him go out there. I honestly reckon that someone like Jamie Vardy would score goals against Panathinaikos, would score goals in the Champions League, and would probably score you 25 to 30 goals in the SPL. You know, because he's fast, he's aggressive, he's strong, he knows where the goal is, he still knows where the goal is. He's still a good footballer, even at 38, you know. So part of me says things that, no, let's go and get some of them. Now I see that Freegan's off the market, Turgeman's the only guy out there. Go get Turgeman, certainly, but then perhaps get Vardy to supplement that and have Vardy, Danilo and Turgeman. And look at this way. What can Vardy teach Turgeman, who's only a young lad? What can he still teach Danilo, who's still learning the game? What can he teach some of the strikers coming through as well, the Archie Stephens of this world, the Josh Gentles of this world as well? What can he pass on to them? What can he help them with? You know, and as Martin spoke about, as we said at the start of the video, leadership. Experienced leadership. Could Jamie Vardy be that experienced leader, guys? Look, I'd love to get your thoughts on Jamie Vardy. Is he someone we should be considering? Would you bring him to Rangers? Do you think it's realistic? Let me know in the comments down below this video. Well, guys, thank you for watching Glasgow Rangers Nation. It's been a pleasure speaking to you, as always, here on the channel. If you've enjoyed the content, please like, comment, share and subscribe, something like that. Anyway, obviously like the video. Please like the video, guys. We get thousands and thousands of views, but the likes are not really high. 1,000 likes per video would be amazing, guys. It would really help push the video. The more likes, the more comments you get, the more the video is pushed by YouTube. So please smash that like. Thank you very much for watching, guys. I'm about to speak to you very soon here on Glasgow Rangers Nation.